Welcome everybody, thank you for being there. This is Rafa once again with Mystic Times. Today I have the great repeated honor of having with me my dear friend Michael Cremo. Michael, he's very well known because of his research onto extreme human antiquity. He's found evidence of potential evidence of who knows what, but at least the one that is most compelling for me is a kind of like a boot mark on a very ancient part of the layers of the soil. So I don't know, I think it's like million years old. We're gonna talk a little bit about his work, but also as we did last time, we're gonna get into some spirituality and Michael Cremo, how are you?
I'm good, Rafa. How are you?
I'm doing good too. Again, like I was just saying, I'm very excited to have you back. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I've started traveling again. During the COVID times, I was grounded
Mm.
in Los Angeles, but I've been traveling around a little bit, speaking and attending conferences and things like that. So that's good to be moving around again, meeting people in person.
Yeah, that's amazing. We were talking just now before we started recording. I mentioned that your video, our previous conversation recently has been getting some traction, some more views and comments. And I was wondering what you've been up to recently that might have caught people's attention.
Well, there's a few things. This summer, I went to Prague in the Czech Republic for a meeting of the World Archaeological Congress. It's one of the world's largest international organizations of archaeologists. And I made a presentation there. I presented a paper about a project that I'm working with in India. It's called the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium. And the purpose of it is to explain to people, demonstrate to people some of the principles of Vedic cosmology. The Vedas are the literature of ancient India. They're originally in the Sanskrit language. And these days, archaeologists are very much interested in what they call heritage. Every country has its archaeological heritage. Egypt has the pyramids. Uh, Greece has the Parthenon and the Acropolis. Rome has the Colosseum. They become very interested in heritage, which means they collect things or take things from the past and present them to people in the present as their heritage. But now they're even beginning to think about the future, what we are going to pass on to the future, what we are going to preserve. And there are two kinds of heritage, tangible and intangible. Tangible means something solid like a statue or a building, and intangible heritage means something cultural, like some cosmological ideas, for example. So that's what this project I'm involved in India has to do with. I'm a consultant for developing museum exhibits to illustrate this Vedic cosmology, which has been present there for thousands of years, but it's in danger of disappearing. So I think it's important to preserve the insights of this Vedic cosmology for people, not just in India, but around the world, because these are very important questions for us. Who are we? What is our place in the universe? What is this universe? course, recently, a lot of scientists and philosophers have begun suggesting maybe we're in a simulated world running on some computer somewhere else in the universe. So,
Yeah, which from the very first moment I heard that, I think it's called the, it's not the holographic universe, it's the simulation theory. From the very,
simulation theory,
yeah,
yes.
from the start, I thought, well, finally, yeah, finally, science is daring to take a step closer to what spirituality has been saying all along. They still needed to be a material computer somewhere else or on the other side, let's say. But eventually, I guess they'll come to the conclusion, or they'll understand how our universe is already a kind of computer.
Yeah, already a kind of simulation of some higher reality. Yeah, at least what they're talking about in this simulation theory or simulation hypothesis is the idea that within the simulated world, you don't have the resources to give consciousness to the personalities who are operating within that simulated world. Of course, there are actually two versions of the simulation theory. One is that somehow or other computer digital operations can produce consciousness, and yeah, they can produce actual living things within a simulated world. I don't accept that. Nobody has shown up to this point how you can get consciousness out of matter. So the other idea is that you have personalities who are not virtual, but who are, you could say, physical beings. You know, you have their brains or their senses wired up to the virtual reality that exists in digital form in some cyberspace. And that idea is very compatible with the idea that we exist in a kind of alternative reality, and there is a higher reality where we really belong as at the core of our being. And now we're just in a temporary place, like Plato's cave analogy, for example. But this is an updated, very persuasive type of concept that can give people who have, up to this point, not really seriously considered the idea that there may be a conscious self that can exist apart from the body, that we interact with the world that we're in, or that there may be a creator, an intelligence behind the reality that we experience. So it's a very interesting development. A couple of months ago, I was at a conference in Arizona called Science of Consciousness. It's and there was a talk by David Chalmers, who is a philosopher of science who has been very active in consciousness studies. He was the one who formulated the idea that consciousness is the hard problem. You know, what we do with consciousness, our intelligence, how we operate in the world, you can reduce that perhaps to brain circuitry, patterns of neurons firing in the brain. But this awareness that we have that is what he said is the hard problem that nobody has solved. Where does that come from? So he made a presentation about, simulated worlds, the simulation hypothesis. And even though he's an atheist, he has said that the virtual realities that are very common today and that are becoming more and more advanced in their ability to replicate what we call reality is something that has made him seriously consider the idea of a creator, of the idea that there may be a self outside the system of material elements operating according to material laws of physics. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, the idea of a creator, I think that's the hardest one for scientists, or not for all scientists, but for a certain kind of scientists. It's something that's so hard for them to consider, because I don't know. Each one of them might have their own interpretations of what a creator or a god might be, and that might be what's stopping them from considering it. But on the other side, the possibility of a higher self, or a part of us which is outside of the simulation, to put it in a way, that idea, to a certain point, when you start looking at your own experience, that idea starts to become evident, and you look at your experience, and you start asking questions like, okay, so maybe I am only electrical impulses in my nervous system. Okay, what causes those electrical impulses? What is the cause behind that? What causes that to appear as awareness? What processes are there before the spark travels along the spine and inside the brain, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then there's the whole question, why are you experiencing this? why are we in this situation? So it becomes problematic in that sense. I mean, sometimes they say, how do you know you're not in a simulation right now? And simulation means that you're simulating something. And that something is the root of our being. And if we're not in touch with that real something, that real essence of our self, or the real essence of our environment, we're going to feel uncomfortable. And I think in the material world, which is where we are right now, we do feel a little uncomfortable, because if we identify with our material bodies, we learn at some point or other that they're temporary. They come into being at a certain point in time. The body may last a certain number of years, but then at a certain point it's gone. And there's something in us, deep in our consciousness, that doesn't feel comfortable about that. There's a sense that, well, I don't want to be in this position of being in a temporary situation. I would like a permanent situation. And actually, there is a permanent situation, but it's not going to be found here. That's the essence of it. Simulation means it's simulating something that's real. Like if you have a tree, a fruit tree, say a mango tree, reflected in a body of water, like a pond or a lake. Now, the reflection of the tree, the simulation of the tree is real. It's not a total illusion. There actually is a reflection on the surface of the water. But if you try to enjoy the fruit, taste the fruit, you won't be able to do it in that simulation of the tree. But it points to a real tree. And if you turn your attention, you can see the real tree on the shore. You go there to that tree, you can get the fruit. So we're kind of in a position like that. Actually, according to the Vedic literature, it's explained. Uh, David Chalmers said at this conference that if you're in a simulated world, which we probably are, according to the way that he looks at things, you wouldn't know it unless the simulator, the person who made the simulation, would kind of intervene in the simulated world and tell you, well, it's a simulated world, here's how we did it. Like they used to have a television program called Candid Camera, and people would be filmed doing, crazy things, and then they would show the camera. Say, okay, you. So if somebody were to, if the simulator were to intervene and say, okay, here it is, here's how we do it, you're in a simulation. Otherwise, you won't know for sure whether or not you are in a simulated world. But in different spiritual traditions, this knowledge that we are in a simulated world has been provided and given, and steps are outlined about how anyone can get to the real ground reality.
Yeah, I would say that's what, in more modern times, in part, that's what Jung would have called the synchronicities, and maybe earlier it could be what's known as gnosis, and
Yeah,
I would dare to say that like myself, you must have had some of those, let's say, interventions or revelations from higher densities or higher realities.
yes.
And I would say that's what probably started you, or shoved you a little bit further along your spiritual path, into becoming what's called the Hare Krishnas, or International Society for Krishna Consciousness, right?
Yes. Yeah, that I was always interested in things like that. Always, even as a child, I always wanted to know what's the real truth about things. What is the actual fact? Because I didn't like being deceived myself, and I didn't like it if I saw another person being deceived. So yeah, I mean that this is one of the functions of intelligence as it's described in the Sankhya philosophy of India. The first function of intelligence is doubt. And, this doubt means just not to accept what may at first apparently be true, to be able to question it. And then the next function is to be able to detect what is false. And the third function of intelligence is to be able to apprehend what is factual, what is really true. And then the fourth function of intelligence is remembrance, to be able to, once you've established something, to be able to keep to it and not let it go out of your intelligence. So I think we all have intelligence, but some are more attentive to their intelligence than others. They don't let it be hijacked in so many ways in which people are misled and deceived today.
Yes, well, first of all, yeah, this idea of intelligence hijacking, that's very interesting. That's something that's definitely going on today, and it's probably been going on for, who knows, for all of human history, people trying to get an upper hand on others. But
That's
yeah,
a fact.
yeah, and but at the same time, I love this. One of the things that's always been so attractive for me from Hinduism or from Vedic thought is how they came to, especially in philosophical inquiry, let's say, how they've presented questions that we've learned. Maybe some we say, oh, okay, so the Greeks said this and that, and then you start studying Vedic stuff and you say, oh, here it's a precedent for that. They already asked those questions, and actually they've even answered them and made contrary arguments and created like the next step for that, and gone even deeper. And then you come to our present day, our modern times, and you see stuff like you were saying earlier of David Chalmers and the hard problem of consciousness, and you start going again to the Hindu texts, and you say, oh, these people have already been asking these questions, and there's already a 1,000-year-old school that says yes, and then a 1,000-year-old school that says no, and there's conversations between them and books saying one thing and a book replying, and we're just asking the questions and thinking we're so smart in asking them, and not even looking at our heritage as a humanity and seeing, oh, but people before us have already been working with this question.
Yeah, it's one thing that I really appreciated about the texts from India, like Bhagavad Gita or the Puranas or the Upanishads. They're presented as dialogues. You know, someone is speaking and someone is asking questions. And, you know, there's a discussion and things go on that basis, not presented as, you know, dogma. Here's a list of teachings that you have to believe, and then you're properly situated. No, there's this constant inquiry, you know, putting more and more questions, and getting answers, and then asking questions about those answers. In one sense, it's sometimes how science presents itself in its ideal form, which unfortunately isn't really followed. but you could say the scientist is putting questions to nature, who gives answers. Nature gives answers, and the scientists question the answers that they get. And it kind of goes on in that way. But whether we're talking about spiritual life or scientific life, there can sometimes be deviations from the ideal form, where someone starts dictating the answers to questions and not leaving it up to the person to accept or reject it, be persuaded or not persuaded, but trying to impose the answers or ideas either by the force of government or by some other type of imposition.
Yeah, I remember the first example that comes to mind is the speed of light. How eventually they decided, okay, the speed of light is defined as a number, and so now the speed of light is this number, so there's no need to experiment or continue corroborating its constancy, let's say, and if you were to measure it and you get a kind of not exactly that number but very close, you would say, okay, that's an error in measurement, and just discard it as an error in measurement. But who knows, maybe if we were continually checking the speed of light, we might start to see a kind of deviation up, deviation down, or maybe up and down. Maybe it's not always fixed. Maybe it's making a kind of dance around a particular value, maybe. But since the definition is the number, now it's not a big possibility to doubt that, or that's my point is that's a kind of very subtle way in which intellect can be hijacked, even, and that's the saddest part. It might even be unintentional. We sometimes fall into the conspiracy theories or whatever, but the greatest conspiracy might be how we unintentionally trick ourselves, or I don't know what the best word to explain it is, but how we unintentionally hack ourselves without even knowing it, and then we continue moving forward unaware that along the path we hacked our own system and got out of the correct path, let's say, and started going and going, and then there's other smaller hacks along the way as well that continue deviating our path.
Yeah, it becomes like a problem in science. I mean, the authority of science is based on the idea that scientists of a particular discipline, say physics, for example, which would be what you were talking about, they have authority because they're the experts. And who determines that they are the experts? They do. So it's kind of like a self-validating kind of system. And philosophers of science and historians of science have studied this phenomenon. And when what becomes really problematic is how this group, this self-appointed group of experts in a field, deals with minority opinions within it. Like you said, most physicists accept the speed of light is 186,000 miles per second, or some fraction of that, to some decimal points. but basically 186,000 miles per second, and it's a constant, a universal constant. Information can't be transmitted any faster than that. So, but there are, as you pointed out, researchers who have gotten other measures for the speed of light. And it becomes, okay, then how do you deal with those people? You could, as you say, dismiss them or marginalize them or something. But in the history of science, if you look at it, there have been many times in which someone has had a minority opinion that later becomes the new orthodoxy, you could say. So it's it becomes like as I said, a problem. If that majority group tries to impose its ideas on everyone, it becomes problematic.
And it feels like it's a kind of repetition of the idea of Atlantis, I believe, of this kind of priesthood placing themselves between the common people, let's say, and knowledge. So in other words, we could call it between the people and God, between the people and truth. They place themselves in the center because of their own psychological insecurities, I guess. And they say, okay, I am infallible. What I have understood and studied is the truth. And and uh, and why is it true? It's true because I studied it and I am infallible. So it's like circular logic of I'm right because I'm right, and you're wrong because you're not me. And they 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 lose self-awareness, I guess, is what's missing there. They don't realize the fallacies in their own reasoning. I remember learning about fallacies in high school, and I listened to scientific theories, just like we were saying before, mm, the neurology and the electricity and what is the cause of that, or maybe the other idea is probably the Big Bang, and this thing about the defining, for example, the speed of light. The fallacy there is like, what is the cause of this? What is the thing that's behind? And they're not asking that question. Like, okay, so yeah, the Big Bang. Okay, so everything started in the Big Bang, and it went on and on. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just like questioning it, doubting it. Like in that first function of intellect. And so, okay, my first question, since I was very young, is like, okay, what caused the point to go bang? What happened before it? If in a certain way there would apparently need to be something that causes it, but at the same time maybe not. And what does it imply if there is no cause behind it? It's like big questions that I think scientists are not really recognizing, that these questions imply there's some modifications needed in their theories, I believe.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things I'd like to say in response to some of the things you were talking about. One of them has to do with what we were talking about before, the groups of scientists imposing their views. I would like to say that just because one is in a minority doesn't necessarily, mean one is correct. Say you are a scientist or a religionist, whatever, who's been who finds himself or herself in a position where they have to make decisions about things, whether it's the content of a museum or what gets published in a journal or what gets taught in a classroom. Uh, everyone has to make decisions like that. Like you have to make decisions about who you're going to speak to on your podcast. So I think the real issue is not whether somebody has an idea that they think is right and another person may have another idea that they think is right, and one may be in a more socially influential position than the other. That's all natural, I would say. Uh, where I see the problem comes in is when somebody, whatever their position is, tries to force another person to behave or think as they want them to think. That's where the problem comes in. If I'm in a minority position, say, as I am in the world of archaeology, for example, where most archaeologists think humans like us first came into existence less than 300,000 years ago. And I'm trying to persuade them, no, there's evidence that shows humans have existed for far longer than that, going back many millions of years. So if they don't try to force me to accept what they say, and I don't try to force them to accept what I say, and we just try to persuade each other, then I'm okay with that. But as soon as the idea of forcing or compelling someone to accept an idea comes, I don't like that very much. And what you had to say about the Big Bang is very interesting to me, because you were saying there's got to be something that causes it before the Big Bang. Something had to be there. And of course, there are a lot of different options, but I think we have to look at what existed before the Big Bang should be in some ways explaining or accounting for what comes after the Big Bang. And I would say that if we're in a universe in which there are conscious, intelligent beings, I would say whatever caused it also had to have consciousness and intelligence. That's would account for, because if that's not accepted, then how do you get consciousness in this universe? How do you get intelligent life forms that are very complex, biologically speaking? If you can't account for that, and at the present moment, those who support a purely materialistic concept of the Big Bang, they've got a problem. One way they try to get around it is proposing, well, there are many universes, and some of them are finely tuned for life to exist as ours is, and some aren't. But we don't have to go to the idea of a creator. We can just have the concept of millions and millions of universes being produced somehow or other, one after another, and each one, the laws of physics, the physical constants are tuned in one way, and in the other universes they're set differently. And out of all those millions and millions of universes, one of them is going to have everything fine-tuned for life to exist. And that's where we are. We just won the lottery, so to speak.
To a certain degree, it feels like every answer they try to give as we move like backwards, let's say, is kind of like an attempt to avoid saying God. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, the Big Bang. Oh, wow, great theory. One question: what caused the Big Bang? Oh, well, let us study. Also, strings, powerful strings that I don't know, whatever in the quantum field that fluctuated. Oh, interesting. Good answer. What caused the strings to fluctuate? I don't know, whatever, the Higgs boson, or I don't know what they might answer to that. But there's always the possibility of asking what caused that and what caused that, etc., etc. And that's why I think it's interesting that you mentioned consciousness needing to come into the universe, let's say, from the very get-go. Because when you are asking what caused that, it's kind of similar to some of the spiritual traditions. They have these practices of of looking at yourself, and so looking at your thoughts and continuing to ask, okay, I am not that, not that, not that, and you start going back and back, and it's very similar to this process, but they are avoiding the inevitable answer that lies behind, that is, okay, something that is not a thing is what caused everything, and that is what religions and spirituality has been calling God for all eternity. And I think, yeah, in part one of the problems is something psychological, of like kind of bending the knee to something higher than their intellect, which is a kind of ego that some scientists have, a kind of identification with their thoughts.
Mhm.
But then there's also this more I think it's a type of intelligence that allows you, which is actually, when you practice it, it starts becoming very evident. But this type of intelligence, maybe spiritual intelligence, or whatever we might call it, that allows you to see how it's possible that there is this thing that is not a thing, this like underlying paradox in the universe, you know, this there's you're having an experience, or we are perceiving, okay, and then there is something that is perceiving our perception or experiencing our experiencing, and you could even go infinitely backwards, something experiencing the experiencing of the experiencing of the experiencing. There's like always like Russian dolls, you know, something else, and that kind of thinking or thought process, I think it's hard for a certain for certain people who haven't maybe got the intuition developed yet, I think.
Yeah, well, I think that's where this simulation theory becomes helpful. It gives many people who have had no way to rationally conceive of how a creator outside the universe is responsible for it. This idea of, you know, simulated realities, virtual reality systems, I think can really help such people. You know, you can see, like in the example of David Chalmers, and he himself says he's got a book out called Reality Plus, which I just read. And then he says, well, I've always been an atheist, but if, you know, what I'm learning about, you know, virtual reality is true, then the idea of God becomes more acceptable for me. Not that he's adopted it necessarily, but it becomes more of a rational possibility for many people. And that's all that I would really expect. That basically that's what I try to do in all of my work, is give people an option to think about. I'm not going to insist that they adopt it, but think about it. And if it makes sense to you, well, that's good.
Yeah, we would actually need to mistrust or to doubt if there were somebody coming and say, okay, yeah, now the new paradigm is this paradigm of humanity has existed for millions and millions of years, and you all must believe it. I wouldn't trust that guy if he was insisting. And I would wonder what he has to gain from convincing everybody of that. And you remind me of this story or this example that's used sometimes in, I think it's from Hinduism probably, or maybe Buddhism, of if you have a thorn on your foot, you are walking and you step on a thorn, and what you could do is you could get another thorn to take out the first thorn, but then what you do is the second thorn you also throw it away. And people seem to be, with these recursive answers, they seem to be getting a thorn to take out the thorn and keeping it, or it stays stuck in place of the first thorn, and then they get another answer to try to take out the second thorn, and the third thorn sticks. And so, for example, in this idea of simulation theory, it's like, okay, so imagine a creator that is outside of this simulation. Okay, and who created him is the question. Well, he's also in a simulation, so imagine a creator outside of his simulation, and who created that one? We're all talking about the same ineffable thing in the end. We're all trying to say the same thing, which I believe is what well, on the first hand, is what people have been calling God. But the other thing that I'm as we're speaking, that's coming to mind and I'm connecting it with, is the idea of love, right? It's something, to put it in words only, something that desired for you to exist and have an experience of getting to know it, and who actually became you in order to remember itself, out of just the pure joy of the ride and the journey and the learning, and the learning through pain, but also learning through love and learning through contrast. And it's like the biggest expression of love, and it's just so beautiful. And to see people slowly going towards that kind of answer, even if it might seem that they are still rejecting the answer, in a way, this continuing to give recursive answers, we can see a kind of direction that thought in these groups is going, that eventually, sooner or later, ends up in, okay, I give up, there's a God. All right. But the thing is,
well,
what's the definition that they give to God? That's in part what I think they're having trouble with.
yeah, I think you brought up something very important. We're not just logic machines. That, in other words, we do have to know the truth about different things, but ultimately in our being, that search for love, the experience of love, a loving exchange, is there. It's kind of fundamental. It's a very fundamental aspect of things. And the particular spiritual path that I follow is Bhakti yoga, the yoga of devotion. And that's based on the idea that as a conscious self, an eternal conscious person, I have deep inside a desire or tendency to love and be loved. And the question is, where does that tendency come from, and how is it going to be realized? And in the teachings of the Bhakti school, it's put forward the idea that that tendency to love in each soul is there because that tendency is there in the supreme conscious being, God, you could say. I mean, normally people think of God as a creator, and in the cosmology of ancient India, God is involved in the creation of universes, material universes, but he delegates most of the responsibility to other beings. Like Plato in the Greek philosophy had the idea of a demiurge, who was kind of a cosmic engineering guy who made universes for God. So in the Vedic cosmology, that idea is also there. But ultimately, God isn't a creator of material universes. And I say he, but God exists in a combined male and female form in this philosophy. His real purpose is to engage in a loving, eternal exchange with each individual soul, and each one has a unique, personal, pleasurable relationship with the Supreme Soul. And discovering that is the real purpose of existence. So I think you've hit on a very important point that, yes, we're interested in the truth about things, who we are, where we are, what is this universe we're in, what is our destination. Yes, we're interested in truth. We're interested in proper behavior, more on some kind of principles, how to relate to each other in this world. But beyond that, beyond truth and justice, there's this principle of happiness and love, ultimately, which means relationship. So very good that you brought that in.
Yes. Yeah, that's something that also was interesting for me about the Bhakti tradition. I'm not part of any particular school, but I've met a few Hare Krishnas and had conversations, and they're just amazing. And but the idea in general of Bhakti, of reconnecting to God through love, and especially if you have a partner, you can love the person, but at the same time love that Russian nesting dolls quality in them. You can also love that witness consciousness in them that is just reflecting your own and reflecting this other thing. Ramdas, he would say that when you're in relationship, it's not two, but it's actually three. So you have the couple, and then this third thing that he called love. This third thing is is what you're, it's hard for me to put in words, but that is what you're actually loving. You know, you're loving love itself. You are not just experiencing it, but you are being it. And you kind of use, like the example with the thorns, it's not that your partner would be a thorn necessarily, but you're using your partner as an excuse to continue to remind yourself of what you're doing, which is love and love and love and love. And it gets
Right.
hard sometimes, it's easier some other times. uh, but that's the whole point. It's like, if there were no challenges, how would you know that you were succeeding or that you were growing? And as you were speaking, I opened my own copy of the Bhagavad Gita here, and because you were reminding me of this particular image in the book.
Yeah, it's the sage seeing with equal vision God in the hearts of all living things, inside the human beings, inside the plants, inside the animals. So God's presence in every living thing is as super soul, which means basically, as I said, the material universe is like a virtual reality system, and it's a simulated world. And what it is, it's a simulation of the spiritual world where it's possible to exist on the platform of Sat Chit Ananda, eternal life, full knowledge, and full pleasure in a rasa or relationship with God on that level. If at if we're not present on that level right now, it's because the ruling principle of that level is unselfish, loving, harmonious cooperation. And on that level, people don't even, the souls, they don't see God as God. They just see God as the most attractive person. That's all. There's no worship. There's no awe and reverence. Everything is just very spontaneous and loving and free, but unselfish. Unselfish. If there's any degree of a desire to exploit, dominate, and control others, then it's not going to go on there. It's going to go on in the simulated world. So learning the difference, I mean, this is, I would say, the purpose of all the experiences that we undergo here, that even though we've kind of separated ourselves from God, God hasn't separated himself from us. It's in our hearts. Sometimes people say God is love. Well, that's true, yes. And one sign of that is that wherever we go, we may spend millions of lifetimes in these simulated worlds, these virtual realities of the material universes. We may spend millions of lifetimes here, but we're never forgotten. God never leaves us. We may have turned from him, but he doesn't turn away from us. And we somehow or other, we have to learn the difference between selfish love and real love. And that's something I'm working on. I suppose everyone in their own way is working on. And
There's no other work, right?
yeah, that's the journey.
And it's so much something that we should, it's okay to use other people as proxies, let's say, but it's something that should be very much directed, first of all, towards ourselves, and finding ways to accept those parts of ourselves that we don't really wish or want to accept. But a love that doesn't include yourself is a love that's incomplete. And at the same time, if it doesn't include yourself, then what kind of love are you giving to others, or are you sharing with
Yes.
others?
Yeah, one has to understand and, as you say, love the self, the other, and the source. When it's all love between all of them or amongst all of them, then everybody's satisfied.
Michael Cremo, this is a fantastic conversation. I'm so happy that we also have the beautiful opportunity to continue on a second hour. But we might start wrapping up this first half, which has been, again, beautiful and very, very nice. A very happy time for me. I really enjoy speaking with you. I think we might, just as a preview for the audience, we might continue looking or coming back to the idea of the simulation theory, because I think it's very present in both our minds today. And I really love how you're able to connect it not just with ancient human past, but also with the spiritual side, from your tradition and your perspective, which is such a unique thing in a person. Not many people are able to like join the material and the spiritual, and in particular the scientific and the spiritual side. And that's what makes you, I believe, unique. So I'm very thankful for the opportunity to speak once again with you, and to spend this time together in our, even though it's virtually, we are sharing our auras, our spiritual
Yes.
bodies together in this conversation, and with the people listening and watching. We're sharing something that's so much than just the words we're speaking, or the faces that we might be making, and the movements of the hands while we speak. We're sharing something that's intangible, and that's ineffable as well. So I'm very thankful for Michael being here, and I'm thankful for you guys for having stayed there to share in this conversation with us. We're going to move to the second half, which will probably be on Patreon exclusively, or recently I've been thinking that I really like sharing these conversations for free as well on YouTube. So yeah, look forward to that. It might just come on YouTube, because, well, these conversations with Michael are so special that I really think more people should be exposed to them, or available to see them. So, Michael, just in closing, would you like to share your website or any social links where people might follow your work?
My website is mcremo.com, mcremo.com. And on the website, people can find a schedule link, which should give my upcoming interviews. There's also a link that would give any public lectures that I'm scheduled to give. I don't have too many of them coming up immediately, but over the course of the year, there will be some. And my books are also available on the website. So we have a special offer that if anyone gets from my website my latest published book, My Science, My Religion, they'll also have the opportunity to get, if they want it, a free copy of the book Bhagavad Gita, which Rafa showed a few minutes ago during our talk. So that opportunity is there as well. I also on Facebook, Michael Cremo, it's really me. That's my public figure page. You can follow it. So I think that's about it, Rafa.
I was muted. Yeah, beautiful. I was checking there in the interviews. I can see the one we did before. Yeah, that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing it over there.
Yeah, I'm really happy to share these interviews because we deal with topics that sometimes other people who interview me don't really bring up.
Yeah, well, it's just because of what I was saying before. You have this very strong, strong, I don't know how to call it, but this strong side of you of this strong is not the right word, but this very prevalent or interesting side of what you do, connected to extreme human origins or extreme archaeology, whatever. And it's like such a vast topic in itself, that people get drawn to you because of that work. But through listening to you, in Ancient Aliens or wherever else I watched a few interviews, I started, like, I don't know if you generally mention you being part of ISKCON, but I started, from your words, I started like intuiting, there's something more to this guy. So eventually I discovered that you had this very strong spiritual side as well. So I thought, okay, I need to speak with Michael and to see. And I didn't even think I would be able to get you on. I was like, okay, he's kind of like a celebrity or a star or whatever. I'm gonna cross my fingers and send an email and see if I get a connection. And yeah, I'm so happy that you replied, and especially that you're back today. So in closing, everybody, you can find me on Instagram at @atmanrafa is my thing, and on Patreon you can find exclusive episodes and sound healing and some of my music. And I sometimes also release these episodes before they become public on YouTube. I release them first on Patreon. The Patreon is patreon.com/Rafa Martinelli, where you can sign up to help support my work, support this show. And I'm very thankful for everybody being there. We'll see you on the other side. Bye.